Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Bay Live, part of the Bay Theater's outreach to our community, especially where we're closed and all this COVID-19 crisis going on. Today, what we're going to be talking about at Beyond the Bay is not a discussion of films like we've done in the past, but we're going to be talking about part two of what we missed in 2020. These are films that we would have seen on the big screen. They are all good to be seen and probably better to be seen on the big screen, and we just missed them because we were closed or we've been closed for different reasons here. A couple times for the government closing, but also because of films and other things going on. So this is part two, and today we're going to be looking at Mank, Nomadland, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, The Midnight Sky, Irresistible, Enola Holmes, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And what we are is Bay Theater is a nonprofit theater in Suttons Bay, Michigan, the best county in the United States. Anyways, in Leelanau County, the best county in the United States. And we're a nonprofit theater, and we're run by a bunch of volunteers. And myself, I'm Larry. I'm one of the volunteers. And joining me tonight are going to be discussing the films is Kevin Maher. He's a film professional and he's a member of our programming team. And he also runs a top10filmlist.com blog. Also joining us is Rita Wessels. Rita is a film lover from way back when, and she's been a film lover, and she's also on our programming team. Also, Zeke Smith is joining us, and Zeke is a projectionist and also on our programming team for the Bay Theater. So we all look at a lot of films. We watch a lot of different things, and we've been watching things during the last year. And we've picked some films that have been out, only came out on streaming that we've been watching, or sometimes they hit the theaters, but we were closed. All right. So we've picked some of these films, and tonight we're going to be talking about these films. And how it's going to work is basically one person will introduce the film. Of the 7 films, somebody will give an introduction to it. Then we'll fall back and ask another person to comment on or whatever else, and then see if anybody else does. We won't be able to discuss at length, but your participation, you can kind of come on here and discuss and share with us that you're on. I see somebody already, Sheila and Maher Lee, already indicating that they've joined us as well tonight. And so you can make comments in the chat area, which is around the bottom of your screen somewhere or around the side someplace. And you can make comments, and we won't be able to answer questions like we've done in the past, but we may be able to include your comments during the discussions that we have. So we appreciate you very much being here tonight. We really appreciate the people that are viewing this when it's been taped later. We do get a lot of those people. So we really appreciate the people that are paying attention to this. This is good. And we hope you go out and see these films, at least some of them, that what we discussed tonight. If you haven't seen them in a theater, then watch them, find them on a streaming service of your choice. All right. So let's get started right away here. And the first film tonight is going to be, the first film we're talking about tonight is Mank. And to discuss that, first off, is going to be Kevin. So Kevin, why don't you give us start the discussion going here on Mank. Thank you.
Sure. For those who haven't seen Mank, it's the retelling of the original creation of the first draft of Citizen Kane. As noted on the screen here, it's streamed on Netflix, and the movie's been nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The screenplay is actually based on director David Finch's father, Jack Finch's script that he wrote 26 years ago. The screenplay is largely based on a 1971 article by New Yorker film critic Pauline Kael called Raising Cain that gives pretty much sole credit for the screenplay of Citizen Kane to screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz also wrote Dinner at 8 in the 30s and The Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper, but his attribution as the sole screenwriter of Citizen Kane was largely Pauline Kael's creation. And has been largely debunked since. So Jack Fincher's screenplay is based on a now defunct essay, and I think that's to the film's detriment. But before I get to that, I will just note that the beautiful part about this film is Eric Messerschmitt's stunning black and white cinematography that really does evoke the era of the early 40s when this when it actually takes place. And I think that's the indelible image that Mank left with me. But I think what's left out of the movie is probably more interesting and more important than what's put in the movie. There was definitely, as I mentioned, the idea to create a certain idea that Herman Mankiewicz was the sole screenwriter for the film. But even as early as 1941, when Citizen Kane was up for 9 Oscars, the Writers Guild attributed co-writing credit to Mankiewicz and Orson Welles. Welles did a lot of work post-release to try and create the illusion that he was the sole auteur or creator of Citizen Kane, and even offering Mankiewicz $10,000 additional dollars to have his name not included in the credits for the film. The performances by Gary Oldman and Amanda Seyfried are fantastic. Oldman was probably better in The Darkest Hour, playing Winston Churchill a couple years ago, which he did win the Academy Award for. Amanda Seyfried is probably not as widely known, but she plays another real-life character, real-life person, Marion Davies, who was the mistress of William Randolph Hearst, essentially the subject matter of Citizen Kane. And her part is probably made bigger during this period than it actually was in real life. But nonetheless, an important character in Citizen Kane. But in the end, I think if you know Citizen Kane very well, you'll enjoy the film. There's a picture right there of Orson Welles and Herman Mankiewicz together. And I think the picture really reflects how the script was created. And that is the two of them working together. Orson Welles even said at one point, there's 2 scripts for Citizen Kane. The one that Herman Mankiewicz wrote, the one that I wrote, and ultimately as the producer of the film, I'm responsible for what's on screen. But I think that the truth of the matter is that it was a collaborative effort. So enjoying Mank, if you're a fan of Citizen Kane, may leave you scratching your head. But going into Mank as a period piece that evokes 1940s Hollywood in a genuine and interesting way, Mankiewicz can be enjoyed immensely. So I'd say that's about it.
Zeke, you got any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I'll just add that I was close to not seeing this movie. I hadn't watched Citizen Kane in a long time, and it was just one other Netflix original that popped up, and I'm really glad that I didn't. It was a lot of fun to watch. As Kevin mentioned, the cinematography in it is beautiful, and it really does make you feel like you're living in the 1930s, 40s, which, I mean, I've never lived in, but it made me feel like I did.
Well, I'm glad to say I haven't lived there either. So,
yeah. So don't sleep on this movie. It's definitely something that's worth 2 hours to watch, just to really experience it.
Rita, you have any comments on that?
There we go. I had only recently, within the last year, seen Citizen Kane deliberately. And so I felt that really helped me understand this film better. And as both Kevin and Zeke mentioned, it's a very beautiful period piece. The cinematography is lovely. Just that whole richness of the black and white film is amazing to see. It will be something to be appreciated on a big screen as well. I felt that the story was a little complicated with its back and forth time hopping, and it would help a viewer, if they didn't know anything about the movie Citizen Kane, to know a little bit about Hollywood and the state of the world at that time, because there are some significant issues that come up through the storytelling, and it would help to know what's going on in U.S. history at that time as well. But overall, I felt it was a really well put together film.
Yeah, I agree. It was a well put together film, especially the cinematography of it, the acting. Sometimes I heard Winston Churchill sometimes when I heard Gary Oldman talk, but that was just, it just sounded like that, it's because it's Gary Oldman. And so, but otherwise, it was a good film. I thought it was like there's the scene where they go to the house, the mansion, and I've not been to San Simeon. I used to live in California. I've driven by it a couple times in my life. You know, you see it sitting up on the hill, but they had the big lot in the back. I got to turn that off. It's my little timer. In the back, there's a big lot, and they're putting a movie together. And Mank shows up, and they're talking, everything else, but they're actually filming, and that's how it was done back then. A lot of times, it was just pick up and run. And I think it's good to see this film, especially if you're young, because think about what you want to do with your phones, like your iPhones or your iPads or other mobile devices you have, or smaller cameras and your GoPros, and you're creating films and you're creating things, and there are films that can be put together. And see this, what they were doing back there with all this equipment, and try to make it work, okay? And to make it work right with sound and get the sound linked up and what we can do in our phones today. I think if you're a young person, watch this movie and understand that the movie is based upon the movie itself and how it works, going back forth in time and everything else, like the Citizen Kane movie does. Just appreciate that and look at when you're going out there to make a film with your new devices or however you're going to filmmake it, look at this picture and think about how you could make a film based on using some of these techniques. So that's about it. I think we've all had a say on this one. It's good. And Kevin, can you give us our final take on this?
Sure, yeah. I think the final take for me is that this film is essentially attempting to recast Herman Mankiewicz's legacy. And I think, unfortunately, Orson Welles, for all of his sort of negative things that he brought upon himself, it would have been more impactful to me had they attempted to recast Orson Welles' legacy in Hollywood, because it's really a shame how much has been negatively heaped on him for this film and then for the remainder of his career. So I would actually have people watch the film. It's a very, very well made film, as everyone said. But I would also ask people to dig deeper and offer a plug for a piece I did on the abridged story of Citizen Kane on top10filmlist.com, which sort of fills in the gaps of where this film could have been and should have been, because the most interesting piece of this story was actually in the ellipse that happens after Mank finishes writing the first draft and when he accepts the Academy Award. That's the interesting part of the story, and that's unfortunately what they chose to skip over in making Mank. So highly watchable, but not very accurate.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, everybody. So our next film is going to be Nomadland. And Zeke, you're going to be the one leading this one. Let me move you up to the spot here, put you in the hot seat. So why don't you get us started on Nomadland?
All right. Nomadland is a movie following Vern. She is a nomad. She likes to live in her van and travel all across America. Ever since her husband unfortunately died and the entire town she lived in just about disappeared and actually no longer became a town. So she decided to pack up her life and live on the road. It's a really beautiful movie with fantastic vistas of mountains and desert scapes. It feels documentary-like at times, like we're here to learn about people that decide that living in a house and the normal life that we're all accustomed to, and they decide that it's not for them. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's an entire way of living that I've never even really thought much about, let alone the people that are actively living this life. It follows all sorts of troubles that she comes across, America, whether it's people saying that she can't sleep in certain areas and parking lots, or flat tires, or friends that you have to say goodbye to sometimes. It's very emotional. It's all about the relationships you build along the way of life, and it's definitely worth watching because it really makes you feel something.
Kevin, do you have a follow-up on this? That's good.
Yeah, for me, the film was all about two things. It was about freedom and grief, and how people approach one and how they deal with the other. Fern had a sense of freedom throughout her entire life, as indicates with her interactions with her sister and brother-in-law. And she was always trying to run away. And I think in adopting the life of a nomad, she's not running necessarily away from things, as she may have when she was younger, but she's still seeking that sense of freedom. And then, as Zeke mentioned, sort of the impetus for her life change is the death of her husband and the death of her town. And I think that her dealing with that grief is sort of the evolving piece of the story, because it's very elliptical, the story. It's not highly linear, and people, different characters move in and out of the film. And most of the other actors are non-professional actors who actually are nomads when they shot this film. But I think the thing that really struck me was this undercurrent of American society that is often overlooked and ignored, which is a transient society that exists on the periphery of the capitalist country that we live in. I'm sure that some of these nomads are there by choice, others are there by necessity. And I think it's, how often we look beyond people. She says she's not, and a couple people say this, they're not homeless. They choose to live in something on wheels, whether it's an RV or a van or something else. But they're not homeless. They have a home. They're just need it to be mobile. This movie reminded me of the Florida Project from a couple years ago, which actually takes place, not surprisingly, in Florida, but in Orlando, in sort of the periphery of society, where people are living hand to mouth. And it's a shame that in the richest country in the world that there are these subcultures that exist that fall through the cracks of social services by choice or by necessity. And it's just a shame. And it's a reminder of that. And that's what I took away from Nomadland.
Rita, do you have more to say?
Yeah, I liked the film. I definitely think this is one for the big screen, like Zeke mentioned, with the vistas of the American West. But I know that for me, my overall feeling at the end of the film was one of sadness. Although I realized that it's not my place to feel sad for Fern, because she had made these choices. Like Kevin was indicating, she wasn't homeless, she was houseless. And she moved around, and the idea of the seasonal work in different areas, it's all work that needs to be done. And this is a group of people that wants to travel on their way from one job to another, and they do the work when they get there. Very much documentary in style. I thought the non-actors did an amazing job in telling the story, and I thought Frances McDormand was brilliant in this film. There's minimal dialogue in the movie, but she conveys so much in just her face, her movement, her emoting. It tells the whole story right there, and I think it is a film worth seeing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that is a very good, important film, and I think it can be. We can talk a lot about these films. This is another one like this, and I think one of the things to understand is that this did happen after there was a lot of attention. I think the book was written based on this, where people were losing their homes, their jobs, and everything else after the recession that we had, and that they needed to struggle, and this is the only way they could survive. But there are people who choose this. For example, on Instagram, there's a couple of people that I know I follow that one of them is Wanderly. And this is a husband and wife and 2 kids, small. One is grown up and gone to high school. 3 kids, yeah, 3 kids with 2 kids in the van still. And they are going through their journeys. And we first met them up and they were in Mexico and doing all kinds of stuff. And that's the life they have. But you can see how they change and evolve as time goes on. And another couple is Gone with the Winds. They started years ago with just an RV, and they wanted to live the RV life, and they've turned it into their business and stuff like that. And then they got a sailboat. They ditched the RV and went on a sailboat, lives in the Pacific, and that's how they've made their money off of this and living that life, and they totally like it. So the point with Nomadland, though, is also the thing is that there are people who choose to be nomads still and do find it living, but some people find it out of necessity. And that's where I think the film brings both those together, necessity, or do I get to choose to do this? And Maher says, I didn't know until after the movie that the actors were not actors, but real nomad people. Yes, most of the people in the film, when you watch the credits at the end, they don't identify. You can identify, you probably watch, when you watch the film, I recommend to go watch the film and see who you think is the real actors, then look at the credits afterwards or go look it up online. Those are a lot of stories from the real people telling you these stories. So like the people, why they're doing this and what they find from it. It's very, very not uplifting, but very heartfelt moving film. So thank you, Zeke, and you can bring us home for the final take on this. What's the final take that you would like to leave everybody with?
All right. My final take, and what I think this movie is really trying to say, is life is what you make it. It's not, try not to let it be controlled by the rules of society or what people think is normal. If traveling in a van and living that life is what makes you happy or something that you need to do, then do it. It's not something that people should, like a lot of her family members do, are constantly asking if she's happy with what she does and all these things. It's up to her. It's her life and it's your life. Do what you want.
Yeah, Marilee, that's great. I think I like Zeke's take too. And I think that's it, because life is what you make of it, right? And you get to choose and try to be the one making the choices. All right. Well, it's good. We're going to get on now to the next one. I thank you very much for that. And please go see that movie. It's available on streaming. And what streaming services you have, you may find it. If not, try to see it at somebody else's house who has it. You can make a date out of it, okay? Well, I'm not saying anything, but I'm just saying maybe you could do that. All right. So anyways, let's go on to the next movie. The next one is going to be Rainey's Black Bottom. And I'm the one talking about this, so let's go to that right now. In Rainey's Black Bottom, this film, I was interested in seeing it from the very beginning for a long time when I first heard about it. And after I got done watching it, I said, this is the best film I've seen this year. This was like, to me, the film that I had seen that just kind of stood out. It was just altogether very good film. And there are two actors in this. There's Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman, who are just nailing the parts and just drive the movie through their acting. The acting of this movie is all based on that, the actors. The movie is based on a stage play out in 1982 by August Wilson, I think his name is. And what happens in the movie, though, what they do is they take the movie and they make it into a movie. And at the very beginning, if you're going to watch this movie, please watch it. Make sure you're sitting down to watch the very beginning of the movie. The opening scene in this film and then the open sequence is probably one of the best I've seen in a movie, especially in this last year. Just watch this opening sequence. It will set the tone for how to perceive, and it will set the tone how you will watch the film later on. And basically what happens is the opening sequence, then the next thing you realize that the whole movie is set on basically Rainey. It's based on she did do recordings, and this is based on a concept of that she was doing a recording, and this is a whole day live recording session. And Rainey, you have to understand, is a woman who's a musician and an artist and wants to get her rights. We hear about that all the time, right? Even on the news today, people are still trying to get, women especially, are trying to obtain the rights and have control of what they're doing. And she's asking for it. Now, on top of that, she's Black. And even though it's in Chicago, it's still not a friendly environment. It's all there's to it. So Rainey is representing that. And so the movie revolves around her, and then it also revolves around her band and the guys in her band. And this troupe, those group of people, and there's two other people with Rainey's little group, those people make up the whole entire film. And there's two guys that are the recording studio and everything else. I understand it was Paramount Recording Studio she actually was recording for. And the script and the acting of these people bring all this movie together. And what you see from Rainey is the aspect of being the one female entertainer and being Black and having all these issues. But then when you get from the men in this film, in the band, especially with Levi, Chadwick Boseman's character, you find out, you get the frustration and the anger, the real anger that's hiding within them by the way they're treated and the way they have to act. They're forced to act. And this comes out and it shows throughout the whole movie, and it grows in attention. And it's just the acting and their performances in this film that gets you moving. You don't need action figures. You don't need violence. It is just those things that are happening in this film that make it really good. And I think overall with this, it's a good interpretation by the director to be able to take some of the things and take them outside of the set of actually like on a stage where the recording studio is, and put it into places like the very opening scene or other scenes where they're outside. And I'm usually leery of taking a stage play and put it on the stage screen because they try to do too much in the real world when it doesn't need to be. But this, the director and the screenwriter for it too, but the director, I'll give him credit for it, actually thought through this and did it really well to make you feel, especially that opening sequence, feel what sets this tone for the rest of this film. It's a great film. I recommend people to go see this. So let's go back. Next is who's talking on this one is Rita. Would you like to talk further on this one?
Yes. I like this film very much as well, and I agree with the points that Larry made. And what fascinated me is when I learned that it was based on the play by August Wilson. And as Larry indicated, it's always a little tricky when a film moves from stage or when a story moves from stage to film. And the two main spaces where the action or actually the dialogue happens are the recording studio and then the band room where the band waits and rehearses. And it's a very dialogue-driven film, and you could just imagine it being on a stage and listening to the actors speak their roles to each other. And there is so much storytelling going on in these two settings that it's really worth listening to and appreciating the characters' stories that they are telling in their dialogues with each other. And Larry and I are in a book club together, and we read The Warmth of Other Suns over this winter, and talks about the Great Migration of Black Americans to the northern states. And this fits in really well with that. And you could see the liberty, but the restrictions. They were coming to the north to seek a better life, to do big things, yet they were still oppressed where they were. So that's really well displayed how that's brought in there. This film is a Netflix film, and if you watch it there, they also offer some extra pieces. And I would recommend watching those too when they talk about the costuming and also moving the film from stage to the film, and how the director specifically chose some changes to make the story come alive on film. And that was also very eye-opening and educational.
Very good. Kevin, would you like to say something?
Yeah, and I agree with the part about the tricky nature of moving a stage to a film where you can get stuck in the three dimensions. But here I think, and I would expect in any play to film, that the performances then need to take over what misses from the danger of opening up a play to other physical spaces. And I think that Boseman and who is the female lead?
Viola Davis.
Yeah, Viola Davis are absolutely stunning to watch in everything they do. The close-ups of Viola Davis when she is performing in that opening scene, in that tent scene is just phenomenal, and everything she does is just she's mesmerizing. The whole thing with making the producer get the Coke, and it had to be just right. And this is how I do it. This is what I demand. The power in her performance is just overwhelming. And I think August Wilson, as a great writer, because if you look at Fences, which was made into a film with Denzel Washington maybe 6 years ago, 4 to 6 years ago, something like that, it's the same type of language that he uses, that just he gets emotion and story out concurrently in his plays. And I think that's the pure genius of these two performances of Boseman and Viola Davis's performances. And I hope I think it's a foregone conclusion that Boseman will win the Best Actor Oscar, but I certainly hope that Viola Davis gets an award for supporting actress at the very least, because she's phenomenal.
Zeke, any further comments?
It won't be much. I haven't seen this one yet, but I know that I'll be seeing it later after hearing all this.
Oh, good. So Well, thank you, Mary Lee. The final take on this is a great film, classic film, something I think is going to last over time. And I do think Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman both deserve an Oscar. And the whole cast, the members there, the cast is just, the acting troupe was very good. And the director, I saw, didn't get any nod for this, but I thought translating this from the stage to the screen, I thought it was a very good job. So anyways, I'd recommend highly to go see this. It's very timely, very real. And I think, again, this is in the 20s. And if you haven't read the book, The Great Migration, I'd suggest you maybe take a look at that book as well. It might have you give a better experience of what's going on with this film. So thank you very much. The next film we have is Midnight Sky. And Zeke is going to be doing the intro on that one. So let's go back to Zeke here. And I'll get you going here, Zeke. So let's go talk about Midnight Sky.
So we've talked about a lot of great movies tonight. A lot of them have been things that we've really recommended that people decide to go watch. This is a movie that I did enjoy watching. It was very visually pleasing. It was engaging enough to keep you, looking at the screen. But it's not really going to be making any great lists. At least I don't think it's going to get many awards coming Oscar season. It follows Dr. Augenstein. He is who we believe the last man on Earth after some sort of global catastrophe. And the main plot of it is we're following him trying to reach a weather base to warn astronauts not to land. That Earth is not going to be safe for you, and you're better off turning around and going from where you came from. It really keeps you engaged with intense space scenes, with intense weather and dangers that are on Earth with George Clooney. But with the writing, it kind of falls off a bit. The dialogue has left me wanting more at times, and the overall information you're given, it makes you ask a lot of questions and doesn't answer all too many of them. It's something to watch if you like space, but if you're really looking for something to stay on the edge of your seat, I'm not sure if that's it.
Well, good. Yeah, I mean, I saw the film also, and I understand that George Clooney is the director of this film. But one of the things I think they did in this film is I didn't think they really needed to have all the time spent within the spacecraft. The story, I thought, was more about him. And maybe the book was different. Maybe he was just a little part in the book or whatever, that character. But I thought it was just too much on the spacecraft itself. And understanding, too, that they're trying to identify, as the time goes on, what's all happening here. You discover at the very end some things are revealed to you if you hadn't noticed it before. But the story is a sad ending. It doesn't just end really happily. There's no real, it ends sadly, okay? And if you think about it, but it makes you think about, what I think the movie does is make you think about, are we here to destroy ourselves and destroy this planet? Are we here to live, okay? And I think that's what the movie partly is telling the story of. And I think the character that George Clooney is playing, this doctor, he actually represents that, because you'll find out in the movie, I'll just tell you, he's already got cancer or whatever it is he's got, and he's only got a short time to live. And so it's very challenging for him, yet he wants people to live. He's discovered that people should live. And I think that's a theme in the story. So it's not an overall plus, but if you like sci-fi and you like to watch stuff with spaceships, I can just see the producers going, oh, we can get a big spacecraft with people on it and then do spacewalks and all this stuff happens. Yeah, that's great. But, this actually could have been a better movie if they'd focused more on the George Clooney character and more about the questions about what happened on Earth. So anyways, anybody else have any comments on that? Rita?
Sure, I'll jump in. This isn't really my type of film that I like to watch, but I had read an interview with George Clooney in the AARP magazine, and I like George Clooney generally, so I thought, sure, I'll watch it. It was okay, like Zeke said, it was entertaining, but it's not a big award winner film. I think there was a balance of the confusing parts to me and the really predictable parts. So there's a spacewalk, and as soon as they said, we have to do a spacewalk, I thought, oh no, something's going to happen, because that's always what happens when there's a spacewalk. So there was that, but there was a big aha moment for me, like Larry kind of hinted at. You have to pay attention and watch the clues, and then all of us like, oh, now I get it. And so if you like that kind of a mystery to pull you along in a film, I think you can find it entertaining. That aha moment brought more clarity, but also more questions. Like Zeke said, there's just so many questions unanswered. So I think that the book, maybe, as often is the case, the book might be better than the film itself. I do think it is something that would look spectacular on a big screen, because you've got space, the big giant spaceship, and the Arctic. But it's something fun to watch as a recreational film. It's not a deep one.
Okay, I'm. You guys are being way too nice. This film is horrible. It's. I think it's part of what's
George. It's my friend George. What can I do? You know,
it's part of what's wrong with Hollywood. They spend $100 million making this film, and if you go to IMDb and look at the credits, the special effects and visual effects is 6 pages worth of people creating this film. So it's wholly. It's the script is implausible. The dialogue is trite. They waste so many good actors in this. I mean, Damian Bashir, who plays one of the scientists on the spaceship, is a brilliant actor. And he alone should have better quality of work than this, because it's just, bleh. I agree with Peachy. It's a snooze cruise that ends up going nowhere. This one is thumbs down all the way for me. I did not like it. So,
all right. Zeke, why don't you take us to the final take on this here?
Well, I'd say that it's definitely one that you can skip. It's not something that you're really missing out on if you have not seen this yet. If you like space and you really like cool CGI, it's fun to look at, but you could probably keep it muted and not lose anything.
That's a good response. I like that. All right. Well, let's get on to the next film here. Thank you very much, everybody. That's really good. Let's go to the next one. Rita's going to kick us off on this one. Let's get the setup here. And this film is going to be Irresistible. So, Rita, why don't you go start with us on that?
Sure. This is Irresistible, written and directed by Jon Stewart, formerly of The Daily Show, which was a lot of comedy and political satire. We can have the next slide, please. And I think the film itself is also one of these light and fluffy films. It's not spectacular. Other critics will be more direct on that. Basically, the story is that Steve Carell plays Gary Zimmerman, who is a campaign consultant. He gets wind of an election in Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin, a possible candidate to run against the incumbent mayor. And the fact that it's playing in Wisconsin was a big draw for me, because that's my home state, and I always need to check out whether they're doing my home state justice. So that was the main impetus for me wanting to watch this one. So along with Gary trying to direct the campaign for the Colonel Jack, we can go to the next slide, a competitor comes in, a competitor of Gary's, who also is a campaign consultant, and she decides to help the incumbent. And so there's a big rivalry going on throughout the film between these two campaign consultants. And it gets more and more vicious as it goes along. There are a lot of scenes with the townsfolk all pitching in to help their favorite candidate. And a lot of the expected local yokel versus city slickers jokes are played out here. But there is a twist at the end involving a manila envelope with perhaps incriminating photos. And then there's an even bigger twist at the very, very end of the film, which I found amusing and satisfying at the end. If you don't have time, you don't really have to spend time on this one. It was just a really light, fluffy filler. And I think because of when it was released in the fall of 2020, and our nation was heading into a big national election, I think the timing was a little off for this one, that people were so anxious about the actual elections going on for local, state, and country, that this probably didn't hit the right chord with people at all.
Yeah, and I agree. It all came out at the right time, and I think they staged it at the time. And this was written by Jon Stewart. A lot of people may not know that, but it was written by Jon Stewart. And the film itself, though, too, is if you're really curious about modern elections, and you ask yourself, why do people keep hitting me up trying to fund for these films? All these different people and why not for the films, for the films, yeah, for the campaigns. You can see how money is needed and what they spend it on, and how they measure social media, and how by everybody being tuned in and with their phones and everything else, they're all gathering information about you and how they're strategizing. And this plays because they show both sides of the coins, both two parties fighting against each other. And you can see clearly it's the red team versus the blue team, and it goes back and forth. And we're going to find something at the end that's even more true about the way this all works. I've got some experience with some of this stuff, so I'm just going to tell you, there's a fact at the very end that's revealed, a twist at the very end, and I'm not going to give it away. Neither is Rita. Rita's over there, and neither is Rita. And I think that's really, so if you're interested in politics, want to see something fun, and want to see how technology is used today and why this is all happening the way it is, and how can elections turn out results where somebody wins and another person doesn't? How can this all happen? Where's the marketing going to? How's this all happening? Take a watch of this movie, and you'll get a good humorous view of it as it moves along. Okay. But I think it's very telling at the end. It comes to the conclusions. And I think it's a good light, as Rita says, a nice light film to see regarding that. Zeke, did you have any more? Did you see that yet?
Yeah. It's not going to be much, but I think that just as an inverse, yeah, people were stressed about this election pretty badly. But when I was watching it, it did feel a little good to laugh at an election a bit and for a moment not take it seriously at all and not stress about it. Have some fictional one with Steve Carell being funny. It's a good escapism from modern politics.
Well, I'm going to try and save everybody about 90 minutes. And about 2 years ago, John Oliver did a wonderful 20-minute segment on political action committees and campaign finance reform. And John Stewart took an hour and a half to get to the same point. And John Oliver did it much more entertainingly than Irresistible did. I thought Steve Carell was just a miserable human being throughout.
He was very
the whole
irritating.
Thing.
Yeah,
Yes,
he was very irritating.
Entirely. And it really bugged me because especially when he got to the end, and I won't give away what the end is, but it was just a heck of a long way to go for one simple message. And like I said, John Oliver did it way funnier and way more succinctly a couple years ago. So you can YouTube John Oliver's Last Week Tonight campaign finance reform or political action committees, whatever it's under, and it's way better than Irresistible. I didn't like this one at all. Sorry. I'm Mr. Debbie Downer tonight. I don't know what it is.
Some peaches saying Midnight Sky is Citizen Kane compared to Irresistible. Wasted effort considered the talent involved. Well,
Okay.
It is the point. I agree with that, but I mean, it's a comedy, it's a farce, and
yeah, it's harmless.
It's harmless, and they're really pulling at you. But I mean, it also just, you're right. But I think it says a message without trying to be like John, not saying it really strongly up front. But it was like, holy cow. And yeah, I've known people like Steve Carell and his counterpart. I've known people like this, and I've known what they do, and I know certain things like this stuff. And it's like, yeah, this film is hilarious for this reason, but it's so blatantly obvious,
Right. If Midnight Sky was a waste of money, this is a waste of effort. How about that? Because like Peachy says, there's great people involved in this film.
Yeah.
From Jon Stewart on down, there's some very smart and funny and intelligent people. It's just not.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for me. Sorry.
Sylvan says also that I watched about 15 minutes of this, about 15 minutes, and it seemed pretty slow to me. Yeah, it did seem at first, I remember it was pretty slow, but it catches you into it because it's just like, these people are irritating. What's going to happen here? All right. So let's go to the final one on this one. And Rita, can you give us a final take on this one here?
Yeah. So if you like Steve Carell and you like politics and you can stand a little snark, then this is the kind of film that you might enjoy. Otherwise, it's not really, high ranking at all. You can pass it and you won't miss too much. You might want to follow up on Kevin's recommendation to watch the John Oliver 20-minute version right there.
Yeah, it's good. All right. Well, it seems like we're getting to some light films that are kind of having some good discussion here. This is all fun. Even like the engagement we're getting from everybody out there. Appreciate that. And so, yeah, Peachy keeps going on here. Between Midnight Sky and Irresistible, 4 hours of my life I'll never get back. Well, I think we've all watched films like that. But we continue to watch them, and that's good to see. There must be something here.
This is a good point for me to bring up I call it my 30-minute rule. If I'm 30 minutes into a movie and I don't care at all about the characters, the situation, or anything like that, I will stop it. I will be like, I am not going to waste 4 hours of my life watching this movie. I don't like where it's going so far. I'm not going to let it have any more.
That's a good rule. Oh, good, Zeke. Thank you. So our next film tonight is going to be Enola Holmes, and Enola Holmes is an entertaining film. Now, we've just mentioned a couple of entertaining films that might be entertaining, but I would like you all to think about this film as simply from fun and entertaining film because it really, truly is. It's about Enola Holmes, a young girl, and she's the sister of Sherlock Holmes, but it's a female protagonist. And this young woman in this act does a very good job with this film. And understand, she was also a producer on this film. She's only 17 years old today, this time right now. She's 17 years old. She was a producer on this film, and because she had read all the books, it's based on a series of books. And she had read this and got old enough to finally do this, and she found the money and support and was a producer on this film. And this film is a very entertaining film. It's very fun. It's an adventure story. It's a female protagonist. It does a very good job of walking through all those things. So basically, Enola Holmes is this girl. She's 16 years old, and and her dad had passed away before, and so she's being raised by her mother, who is Helena Bonham Carter, and her mother raises her as a strong female, because her two other brothers have moved on. One is Sherlock Holmes, and the other one is his brother, which I can't remember, who looks like some dastardly one that you think of those English top hat guys with the snivelly Snidecraft type of guys. And that's the way these characters are. It's a very nice put together stereotypical, but Henry Cavill, who plays Superman now, is Sherlock Holmes. And so there's a very good, all the actors, Helena Bonham Carter, Henry Cavill, and the lead here is Millie Bobby Brown, the young woman. And she goes off. What happens, she discovers that her mom disappears on her 16th birthday. She wakes up in the morning and mom's not there. And along the way, she meets a boy. Now, her mom warned her about boys and said, don't pay attention to the boys. Don't get sucked into their story. Don't try to support them or anything else. Stay away from them. But guess what happens? So she's off looking for her mom, but is also trying to help and support this boy and find and help him out. And you can kind of guess where the movie goes from there, and it continues on. Now, what the movie does a lot of, and throughout the movie, since the very beginning of the movie, there's a lot of dramatic asides. And a dramatic aside is basically where the actor is pointing and talking right directly to the camera so that you're involving the audience. They use this technique throughout. And Molly does a very good job with this, and the acting and the direction and the cast around her. And at times you realize she's talking to you, but what happens early on, you get so used to it, there's times where she's not talking to you, but you think she is. And it's very good. It's a very good use of this side. So it's a lot of good staging in this film. I thought it was very appropriate if you're young, you like watching films of this type, adventure films or anything kind of steampunkish. And this kind of steam, although it's using a lot of technology, it does then. But it's a nice mystery for adults too. I enjoyed it very much. I saw this movie, I said, I just enjoyed this film. This was just a lot of fun. And here's another key factor. So Molly Bobby Brown is the actress in this. She has starred in some Netflix series as starting out a few years ago, Stranger Things. She still continues in that. And she was listed as in Time's 100 influential people of the year. She was listed as one of Time's influential 100 of the year. I want you to say this is because I hope there's a sequel for this film. And I think that you're going to see more of her and also her become a more rising star and actor or a player within Hollywood. So I think just giving her who she is today and how she's doing things and thinking forward in the acting and the people supporting her, I think we should look forward to seeing more of this. So that's kind of my take on that right away, and initial take on that. And Kevin, do you have another take on this?
Well, I think I'll echo some of what you said in that, but sort of my preface is I came to this film through the eyes of my 17-year-old daughter, who's been raving about it since it originally aired on Netflix. And I believe now it's rated the second most watched Netflix movie in the history of the service. So it's obviously was very well received. And I just watched it a few weeks ago. And to me, this is the flip side of the two films I just talked about, in that this is what Hollywood does well. And this is what it needs to do more of. First, you have a female protagonist, which a female adolescent protagonist, which is incredibly important. I've never seen Stranger Things, but I know that Millie Bobby Brown is perhaps the breakout star from that. And as you mentioned, she had the juice to get this film made, which I think is another plus in its favor. But it's just a truly enjoyable film. The characters are entertaining. The story is not overwhelming. It's a very fun story. If you compare this to Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law's Sherlock Holmes, which becomes too full of itself as that series moves on, this just has so much more joy attached to it. And I think that's what I liked about it. And she's incredibly engaging, and I agree with you. I think she should have a fantastic career if she's allowed to play characters that play to her charismatic appeal. So I thoroughly enjoyed Enola Holmes. I wouldn't put it on a 10 best list for the year because it's not that kind of film. But from a pure enjoyment standpoint, it's highly enjoyable, and it's for everybody. I think it's for young, old, families, anybody. It's just a really well-made movie.
Rita, any comments?
Yeah, I agree. It's very entertaining. You don't have to think any harder than solving a mystery. There's lots of fun stuff that goes on, and codes to figure out and clues to follow. So that part is very entertaining. The only part that I didn't enjoy in the film, there are two sequences where an assassin is after one of the characters, and Enola fights him off in two places, and that was hard because it was not believable to me that a 16-year-old would be able to fend off a professional assassin, and that was I thought that was a little rougher than it needed to be for a film that could have broad audience appeal and entertainment.
Zeke, did you see this film?
I have not, but I do want to speak a little bit about the dramatic aside that you brought up. And I'm really glad that they decided to use that, because I think that those can really, really bring any sort of book to television adaptation to the next level. Because every time I've read a book and then watched the film, you're missing what the character's thinking that you are always able to get when you are literally inside of their head. So I think it's something that hopefully we'll see more of. I think that when it's done well, it's very entertaining and you really connect with the main protagonist more. But if it is done too much, it can be a bit of a drag.
Well, good. Thank you. And Peachy comes up and says it's a really good and Citizen Kane compared to Downey Jr. Holmes movies. Yes, Robert Downey's those movies. The Enola Holmes is so far superior, and I'm hoping they do have a sequel on that. And the final take on this is if you're looking for an enjoyable movie, it's out on Netflix. Take a chance to go see it. Sit down with somebody you know or somebody young. I wish my daughter's in her 30s, professional, doing great. But I thought of my daughter when I saw this movie and watched it, and I really think it's a good thing to sit down and watch and have a good evening. You want to just have a fun evening, watch this film, and then you want to watch the next one. So I hope it comes out. All right, we're getting down to our final movie tonight, and the final movie tonight is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and we're going to have Kevin's going to be the initial presenter on this to get us started, the discussion started. So let's go with you, Kevin.
I have two prefaces to mention with this film. The first is that there's a certain nostalgia attached to me because it was the last film that I saw in a theater before COVID hit. So for that reason alone, it gets, it has a special place in my heart. And the other caveat is that while this was released internationally in 2019, it wasn't released until February of 2020 here in the States, which is why we're including it in this list of films we missed in 2020. And for me, it was the best film that I saw last year, bar none. It's a French film that takes place in the 1700s, and it's the simple story of a portrait artist brought to an island, the island of Brittany, to create a wedding portrait of a reluctant bride who is promised to a man that she does not know, who is never seen in the film. And it's the story between these two women of how they develop a relationship. And this film is a love story in the purest sense of the word. It is a film that evolves slowly, much like a painting would be created, with simple, short strokes that lead to longer, bigger strokes, and finally the revelation of the entire canvas itself. And writer-director Celine Sciamma creates every image, every frame in the film as if it were a painting in and of itself. Here are 4 examples up here on the screen now that show these very intimate interiors that put the characters in different light and different settings. And the amazing thing that Sciamma does is create texture, perspective, depth in everything that every frame that's shot. If you go to the next slide, you can counter the interiors with now the exteriors you see here. And the calmness of the ocean in one scene, a more riling ocean in the next, and then finally in the bottom right there, this ferocious ocean. And each of these also reflects what's going on in the characters at the time of the framing of these. So if you look at the entire film is the creation of a picture. If you go to the next slide, she balances the lights and blues of the days with these nights here. And if the one in the lower left, I think, is particularly, for me, reminiscent of a Rembrandt picture where there's deep blacks and browns that are holding sort of with a pool of golds and yellows that is the actress here. The film is centered on the 2 main actors, Naomi Merlat and Adele Hanel, and both of them sort of draw you in with their eyes because the director uses a lot of close-ups throughout the film, and both actors' characters are very simply stated. There's not a ton of dialogue in it, so if you're afraid of subtitles, don't run from this film because it's not overly talky. It's the images. You could actually turn off the sound because it's the images that just draw you in to this picture, and it's amazing to see. So I think there's one more slide. Yeah. So here's the portrait on the left in sort of mid painting, but then on the right is how a portrait then becomes, at the end, a separate painting becomes a reflection of the love story between the 2 women. So again, everything is built around painting. One final shot of the artist in front of paintings within a frame of the screen, but outside of the paintings themselves. And again, there's just layers and textures and perspective that Sciamma just layers into this film. And I cannot say watch it on the biggest screen you possibly can, because for an intimate love story, every frame is a sight to behold. That's as simple as I can say it.
Very good. Rita, do you have a follow-up on that?
Yes, I agree with everything that Kevin said. And I just want to add that it's just a gorgeous film. And I appreciated the pacing and the director taking the time to let the viewer focus on each of the beautiful frames that were set up. Like Kevin said, each shot is like a painting, and the director gives the viewer the time to look at it and study it before going on. And again, a story that doesn't need a lot of dialogue, so don't be afraid of the subtitles. They don't say very much, and and the story is conveyed by the scenes and the emotions and the eyes. And interestingly, one thing I noticed is that the story is about these two women, but it's really about the three women, the house help too. And then there are very few men at all in this picture at the very, very beginning and at the very, very end. And they happen to be the boatmen bringing people to the island and back. And also pay attention to the sound, because the sound is very authentic. It's not artificially created at all. It's all the authentic sounds that you actually hear of the people working and moving through their rooms. It's truly a stunning, stunning picture.
Zeke, yes, it definitely go see it. It is very intriguing. And it really could be best on a large screen. Zeke, did you have any further comments on this?
I have not seen this one, but and I feel like I've said it before, but I feel like I'm going to have to watch this one now.
Yes. And yes, Kevin, your explanation of the film is fantastic. Merrily, that is correct. I think doing a peer here, masterful job explaining it, draws me want to see it. Yes, that's good. Very good job. Yep. Well said, Kevin. Yeah, thank you. And I agree with all of that too. And I think Rita brings up other point is the third female, the main third of the duo, but there's a trio. When she gets to the island, is Sophia. And one of the first times you see Sophia is at nighttime, and it looks like they play her with the little candlelight on her face in her gown and everything else that she's wearing, or what clothes she's wearing. And it looks like an old painting, one of those old Rembrandts or something like that, around this fire scene and inside a house. Very well done. And her story itself, there's some very poetic scenes with her in it that are just really good. So that's the third character, I think, in the movie that gets missed a lot, probably. So Zeke, Kevin, can you give us can you give us the final take on this?
You bet. Yeah, so first of all, it's streaming now on Hulu. So I didn't mention that at the top. So if anybody who is interested in watching it, is available on Hulu. And Rita nailed it with one of the other elements of this film is that it's a woman's world that this film takes place in, but on the periphery is the patriarchal dominance of the time, because this thrust of the picture is this arranged marriage to a man that this woman has never met. And I think that juxtaposition of existing in this world that's just of women and completely self-sufficient as only women, but then the overbearing and forceful nature of patriarchy sort of hangs over everything that they do, which I think is another brilliant aspect of this film. And if you see nothing else from 2020, the last probably 4 minutes of this film is a medium shot of Heloise, who's played by Adele Hanel, and she's at a musical performance where they're performing Vivaldi, I believe, and it's about a 3 minute. It just holds on her, and the entirety of their relationship is reflected in just her face. There's no dialogue. There's no anything except the music and her face. And it is pure genius performance, because it encapsulates the entirety of this beautiful relationship between these two women. And for that alone, this film stands above anything else that I saw last year.
Very good. All right. We've gotten down through our films, and since this is the last one, we did 2 weeks worth of them here. We'd like to bring everybody down, and I want the audience members to think about this too, is we're going to go around and we'd like you to think about, if you saw part 1 and part 2, here's a list of all the films we talked about over the last 2 sessions. Which film would you say was the one that you would recommend the most out of all these? Which one was not, you'd say the best of them all, but the one you'd recommend the most out of all these these films because you think it is the best film that you saw from all these. So let's start off with Rita, and you give us your thoughts. What film do you think, Rita?
Thank you. Yeah, it was hard because we had so many good films to choose from. But if I had to pick one that I liked the best and would recommend to see, I would choose Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Mm-hmm. Zeke, which one would you pick?
I'm kidding. If I'd had to pick one, I would choose Trial of the Chicago 7. I loved every minute of that movie.
Kevin, yours?
I'm with Zeke. I mean, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is the best piece of art and the best film, but Chicago 7 is something people need to see. They need to understand it, and it's incredibly entertaining from just a pure entertainment standpoint. So I would say everybody should see Chicago 7. Any discerning person should go watch Portrait of a Lady on Fire. How about that?
Well, I'm also
I gotta get the snob in there. So.
Well, that's fine. That's fine because I agree with Rita. Ma Rainey still, if watching all these films and other films we've seen, Ma Rainey still sticks with me as being something like you were saying, Kevin, something that everybody should see at this point. Okay, and it's just really relevant, really true. And the acting and the cinematography, everything put it together very well. So we're getting down to the last minutes here of the show. We've gone a little longer in our normal time, and I appreciate everybody being here. And if you've been watching this either live or you're watching this recorded, please subscribe to the Bay Theater YouTube channel. As we do things, we put things up on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe to us and you also turn on notifications, you'll get notified every time we load something up onto our Bay Theater. So we appreciate that very much. And also, we're not going to be doing another Beyond the Bay for a while. We don't know for sure. But we are now, stay tuned, because we are now selecting and scheduling movies for the summer. We just even got an update today about what we thought the schedule could be and what films they had. And studios are changing as time goes on. So we're in the middle of all that, trying to evaluate films and movies, our audience, and everything else. So stay tuned. And we're all members of the Bay Theater Community Theater, including, I want to say special thank you today to White Fang, who is backstage and is the one helping us out with the comments and putting things up on the screen for us and everything else. So thank you very much, White Fang. You've been with us. And so we don't know when we'll see you again, but we want to wish everybody a good day. And thank you very much. And come to the movies when we open up. In the meantime, think about the movies you missed and be able to go and be able to watch those on streaming. So thank you very much. Enjoy. Thank you. See you at the movies.